This is a story that Jennifer is bringing to us tonight about this tale of the Keystone XL pipeline that has extended. Jennifer, I think, is it 4 administrations? Didn't this kind of start like right at the end of the Bush administration?
Yeah. Then of course, they decided no, it's a no-go. And then Trump went ahead and, signed off on the permits for construction. And then of course there was the DAPL protests in 2016 and 2017.
You pulled together a video for us that kind of gives that history lesson. Do you want me to, we could roll that video and then just jump to you and you can do your thing?
Let's be honest, you pulled the video together. I just do the talking.
The question is, should the president approve a major extension of the Keystone XL pipeline? It's a debate that divides business, environmental groups, and labor unions. The pipeline would carry oil more than 1,700 miles from the tar sands of Canada to Port Arthur in the U.S. Gulf Coast, passing through half a dozen states along the way. In one, Nebraska, there was significant opposition to the plan.
The wide-open spaces of central Nebraska are an unlikely battlefield, but this is where the two opposing sides come head-to-head in the fight over the Keystone XL pipeline.
And where it's going across
As now proposed, the pipeline would run right under Jenny Harrington's family farm. We spoke with her a few weeks ago.
Like a new roof, it's pretty great in the first 10 years, but you get 15, 25 years down the road, and pipelines are going to leak, are going to rupture.
Good morning, everybody. Several years ago, the State Department began a review process for the proposed construction of a pipeline that would carry Canadian crude oil through our heartland to ports in the Gulf of Mexico and out into the world market. This morning, Secretary Kerry informed me that after extensive public outreach and consultation with other cabinet agencies, the State Department has decided that the Keystone XL pipeline would not serve the national interests of the United States.
This is with regard to the construction of the Keystone pipeline, something that's been in dispute, and it's subject to a renegotiation of terms by us. We're going to renegotiate some of the terms, and if they'd like, we'll see if we can get that pipeline built. A lot of jobs, 28,000 jobs.
Well, I think it's good news, absolutely. It's good news that we're able to move forward on some energy infrastructure. And of course, we know it will reduce costs for the energy industry and ultimately ensure greater resources going back to Canadians as a result. But and so it's good news. It's very good news.
But that yes vote doesn't mean it's a done deal. It could still take years before construction on Keystone XL gets underway, if it ever does. Landowners, environmental groups, and Indigenous leaders have all launched several lawsuits to block Keystone's construction.
We'll continue to fight the Keystone route and what it means for our water, for our land, for our future generations, our resources, and all those natives and non-natives that are impacted by this, and all of our people. We're not happy about this. You heard it today.
Keystone is meant to carry Alberta oil sands crude south to refineries along the U.S. Gulf Coast. A judge in Montana is now siding with Indigenous and environmental groups and ordering a temporary halt to construction.
The Keystone XL pipeline has suffered yet another setback. The U.S. Supreme Court rejected a request from the Trump administration to allow construction of parts of the Keystone XL pipeline that have been blocked by a federal judge in Montana. The court upheld a lower court ruling, and as Eric Sorensen reports, after years of legal battles, that means the future of the pipeline is again up in the air.
So there's your history lesson. Jennifer, why don't you drop some more on us?
Okay, so of course yesterday, Joe Biden, one of the first things he did was halt the construction of the Keystone Pipeline, or KXL, which actually goes from Nebraska to Alberta. So it's not the entirety of the Keystone Pipeline that would cross through what's called the Dakota Access Pipeline, which of course has already been constructed. So this, from my vantage point, I'm most concerned with the impacts this has on Native peoples and how this plays out in the longer arc of relationships between Indigenous peoples and the federal governments, especially in the context of treaties. So you have a lot of positivity from a lot of water protectors and Native people who think this is a good sign about what could potentially happen. And part of the KXL, where the construction was halted, actually went through the Fort Peck Reservation in Montana and potentially could contaminate their water. So this was a victory of sorts for them. But I want to read a little bit of the statement from Kevin Keller. He is the current president of the Oglala Lakota Nation. And he starts with, quote, President Biden's decision to cancel the permits for the KXL pipeline demonstrates his willingness to listen and follow through for tribal nations, listen to tribal voices, and respect tribal lands. For your action and protection of our water and lands, Mr. President, myself and the Oglala Lakota Nation want to thank you. We look forward to having a healthy line of communication between our governments, building upon and recreating innovative ideas to further our bonds and together thinking forward to create enduring friendships. And this is a really big show of diplomacy on behalf of the Sioux Nation. And it's also an expression of sovereignty because the Oglala Nation is a sovereign nation in relationship to the U.S. federal government. And so what's really, I think, going on here, and what I think is particularly interesting, is there's a sense of optimism here, but also a sense of we want to work with you and we're going to hold you accountable, which has been really kind of the longer arc of history between Native peoples and the U.S. federal government has been really problematic. And if you looked at a lot of what was going on with DAPL, it was this kind of breaking the treaties of Fort Laramie that were negotiated in 1851 and 1868. So I think this is a good step moving forward, but you also have a lot of Native people who are not willing to be complacent about this and are like, no, this is great, but you need to undo what's already been done, and really stand up and honor the treaties that the U.S. federal government has, gone back on for so long and recognize the sovereignty of these Native nations as, equal governments, which I could get into a longer history about that going back to 1830 in the Marshall Trilogy, but I will save the audience. But it's just, again, it's a really kind of optimistic moment for Native nations who were fundamentally impacted or were going to be fundamentally impacted by this last part of construction of the Keystone Pipeline, both in the US and in Canada. But it also, there's a sense of optimism that potentially you have an incoming administration who's willing to work with and listen to Native nations and recognize their sovereignty and do government to government work.
Malcontent Angie said she is so glad that you were talking about this. Just take a wiggle. I don't know. It's like an eye chart. Your screen name is an eye chart. Sending their praises to all of the water warriors and everyone who defended in the Dakotas for their work that they did and the comments that they have going there.
Absolutely.
I lived in South Dakota for 18 months. I always joke it was 17 months too long because I lived in the ugly part of the state. But I spent a lot of time in the outdoors, particularly in Nebraska, up along the border of South Dakota, the Sandhills region. And part of that pipeline would have to run through the Sandhills region. It's an absolutely gorgeous area, and it is home to one of the largest aquifers on the planet. And it is critical infrastructure for the drinking water of a vast number of states. The other thing there's a couple of things that jump out at me. So I'll do 3 facts. So that's number 1. So I'll do number 2. This oil isn't for the United States. Nope. This Alberta, Canada tar sand oil is to get it to the ports in the Golden Triangle so that they can export it. It's not for us because our refineries aren't calibrated to not a significant number of refineries are calibrated to process that oil. You can't just take any type of crude oil and drop it in a refinery. They're calibrated to work with specific types of crude oil. So that's fast fact number 2. Number 3, Freight broker was Steve over at Freight Broker was losing his shit this morning over Keystone XL. That was his lead story.
Oh boy!
And one of the things that jumped out at me with Steve at Freight Broker was this is going to cost 11,000 jobs. Huh? I heard Donald Trump saying this was creating 28,000 jobs, and the 11,000 jobs that would be created are just temporary jobs. These are not permanent jobs. If the pipeline is ever completed, it'll literally only be a couple of hundred people that will be working the pipeline.
Exactly. So I think too, I just want to add, in case people aren't aware, I want to re-up this, the DAPL syllabus that came out during the protest that was crafted by both non-Indigenous and Indigenous scholars. If I can provide a link to you guys later, I will. It's fantastic if you want to read up on that. One of the scholars, her name is Otter Simpson. She's Mohawk. She wrote this amazing book called Mohawk Interruptus. And she talks about how the difficulties of Native nations that extend beyond both borders. It's a fantastic book. The entire syllabus is fantastic. And if people are interested in learning more about the water protectors and what they're fighting for in these treaties, it is a fantastic resource. But also thinking too about like disproportionate uses of force in water against water protectors versus, those that came into the Capitol. So I think this is a really important issue. This has really major consequences for Native nations on both sides of the Canada-US border. It's really something worth investing time and energy in learning about.
Malcontent Carter says, oh, good, 11,000 jobs. Let's poison everybody's water supply.
Exactly.
And it was just a Kiwi gal. Now I'm just totally embarrassed that I couldn't figure that out. My late Gen X came out with that there. What the hell is that? So I really embrace it. Jennifer, thank you so much for that story. We're going to do a little pause for the cause, and then we're going to move on to our COVID 5 Fast Facts.
Okay.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black Coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Just a reminder, malcontents, the Seattle Police Department arrested somebody for breaking windows at a Starbucks in Seattle, and there's still been no arrests, even though a video exists that shows the two people that threw firebombs and tried to burn down Black Coffee Northwest on October 1st. And this is kind of the institutional racism that gets me pretty frustrated and upset. So if you want to support a Black-owned business that is attempting to, as you saw in the video, create a safe space for Black people, what you can do as a white ally is go to these safe spaces of Black people and you can support their business. By the way, the coffee is amazeballs and the potato scones, oh my God, the potato scones. I've had too many potato scones.
Do you feel like they're amazeballs?